Hello and welcome to the 16th episode of the Game Dev Tutorials. Today, I am going to be adding an arrow tower, or arrow towers, for that matter. The steps to do so is that we're going to create the arrow projectile, change the owner for projectiles to be attackable objects. That way, buildings can also be the owner of a projectile. We're going to create the arrow tower class. It's just going to be, an override of a building, and we're going to add a timer and a couple other things, and then a little bit, and then we'll have to pass the projectile. So that's essentially what we're going to do there. We're going to create a delegate to pass said buildings, and then we're going to create the functions for them. We have them for spawn points and for units, but we actually don't have them for buildings, so we'll get that done. We're going to add an arrow tower to the screen or to the game when 1 is pressed. To do that, I actually need to add a new function to our mouse class, which is to get a single press. And then there will be a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done as well. So that's what we're doing. Okay. So first things first, let's come in here, find our projectiles, fireball, copy, paste, rename to arrow, we will change this in a second actually. I guess I should mention that I have 2 new pieces of art. Wonderful, beautiful programmer art, temp art. There's the arrow tower. Took me way too long to do that. Luckily, I was this time watching some They Are Billions gameplay, and then got an arrow. So those are our 2 new pieces of art. This one didn't obviously take very long. Believe it or not, this one took a really long time, and it sucks. So that's why you have to get an artist if you're not creative, right? Okay, I will provide those to you guys down in the description. Make sure you check that out. And then I guess I should grab those and put them in now before I forget. So projectiles, we have the arrow. Content, copy of newer. And in buildings we have the arrow tower. Content, copy of newer. Alright, so instead of fireball, it's now arrow. And then we are going to switch this to attackable object. And that should actually break some things. Yes, so that's got to get changed out. And fireball has to change out the same bit. Now, in projectile 2D, we're setting a speed of 5. We're going to change that for arrow because we want it to be able to miss, but we also want it to hit a lot. So we don't want it to miss all that often. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to speed up the arrow. You could also lead the target, and we'll get to that, well, if we need it. And then I will do a tutorial on how to lead the target. But for right now, we're just going to raise the speed really high. And the arrow will move really fast, and it'll have a low chance of missing. But it can miss, so just keep that in mind. Missing is not a bug. That is something that's allowed. Depending on how often you want to miss, you can adjust some variables, like how much you lead the target by. Right now, we're not going to lead it by at all. Or you can raise or lower the speed in order to adjust how often it misses. The slower the arrow is, the more it'll miss. Okay, that sets up our arrow projectile. And then the next thing... Oh, you know what? We also, because we raised the time, we need to... if we raise the speed, we need to lower the time. So you can see here, time is 1500. And since I doubled the speed, I pretty much cut its timer in half, so it'll travel about the same distance, but maybe it'll travel just slightly farther. Okay, next we need to add the building. So we only have one building. It's tower, so we're just going to copy that sucker to start with. Paste. Rename. Arrow tower. Okay. Alright. Rename. Put that in there. Alright, so now we have that. Let's only give it 10 health just because it's not our main thing. So we're going to need a few variables. We're going to need a int range. We're going to need a timer. MC timer. Maybe, what do we call this timer? Maybe just shoot timer. Or shot timer, shoot timer. Nah, it doesn't really matter. Okay. And equals new. Timer, what do we think? Maybe 1200, so 1.2 seconds. That sounds good. If you want to shoot it less often, raise the timer. If you want to shoot more often, lower the timer. Yeah, that'll work. Alright, so in update, let's make that timer work. Oops. Always good to put the semicolon in. Test our timer. Timer.test. Oops. Okay, and then we will reset our timer here. All the way to 0, just in case. And then we'll need to call a function. Fire arrow. Could be shoot arrow, could be whatever you want. But anyway, that's what we'll call when we're shooting. And then we are going to want enemies because we want to know where they are when we're making this decision. Okay. Now, our AI for this is going to be simple. Shoot at the closest thing. That's what we're going to start with. You can do whatever you want here and make it more or less complicated. In this case, what we're going to do is the simplest thing. I guess the simplest thing would be shoot at the first thing you find, but that's also pretty garbage. So we're going to shoot at the closest thing. This is, in some ways, this is the AI of the tower. Alright, so in order to do that, I'm going to do this the easiest way to understand, not the most complicated way. That's the most efficient way. I want to make it very easy to understand what I'm doing. Closest dist equals range. Ooh, I didn't put range in. Like 220 is probably fine. And then we need a second one that is the current distance. And that one's just equals 0 to start with. And then we need a unit to keep track of what the closest is. Okay, and at the very end we're going to say, we haven't done our loop, but at the very end we're going to say if closest not equals to null. So it found something in range, essentially, is what this is saying, because it'll be set as opposed to null. Then we are going to pass our projectile, which we actually can't do yet, because we don't have the delegate. We'll get to that in a second. Alright, so our loop, wonderful little for loop, int I equals 0, I less than enemy, I think it's units, yep, units dot count, and then I plus plus. Okay, so we're looping for all units in enemy. We are first going to get the current distance. Use our wonderful globals get distance. And then we're going to use the position of the tower and the enemy dot units I dot pose. Okay, so that gets us our distance. And then we're going to test that distance against we're going to test that distance against the closest dist. Closest dist, if it's less than if it's greater than current dist, right? So if the closest dist, it's less than current dist. Sorry, it's a little late today. I almost forgot to do this one. I was playing this. The other day I was watching the Air Billions. Today I was playing some, and then I kind of got carried away time-wise, so it's pretty late for me. I apologize if I'm a little lacking of energy today. Alright, so let's say this happens. What do we want to do? Well, first we want to set closest dist, closest dist equals to current dist. And then we want to set our closest unit equals enemy.units I. So now we are keeping track of our closest unit and our closest distance. Yes, you can do this without having to keep all these variables. You could literally just save the iteration that was the best, but that would also require you to retest for the closest dist against the item in the list of units. So it's a little bit more processor heavy, but it's better on your memory. So this is more memory heavy, but worse, but better on your processor. So yeah, I mean, you just have to choose what you want. In this case, that's what I wanted, so I went with it. Now, we needed to add this wonderful delegate. So let's jump in here. We have pass mob, we have pass projectile, we'll have pass building. Okay. And then in world here, we need an add building. So why don't we just copy this for now? Because it's going to be almost the same. So add building, and this is going to be building. And this is building, and this is building. Building. Now notice these add units, those have to get created. We don't have those yet. But let's do this first before I forget. Game globals dot pass building equals add building. Done. Okay, so that sets our delegate. We come down in here. We need to fix these. So let's just go to definition. And then add unit. Will be a building. This actually needs to be U comes after S. I don't know. That was bad alphabetizing. Whoops. Alright, so building, 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 building. Oh, oops, that was not right. Buildings. And temp building. Alright, so essentially everywhere it said building, we moved it to say unit. Everywhere it said unit, we moved it to say building. And now we kick that. And we go to world, and we put it in those 2 spots I mentioned. Huh. Interesting. I don't think we need that. I don't think we need that here either. Because it's adding it there. Okay, so we remove those. If that causes bugs, then we'll fix it. Yeah, we don't need that. That was a little unintentional cleanup, but hey, those do not need to be there. Okay, so we now have the add building function. We have the delegate. Now we need to come into arrow tower, and we need to fire it off. So, game globals dot pass. Oh, this was a pass projectile. I don't know what I was thinking. We already had this. We are going to need the pass building, but we need it for something different. Anyway, we're passing a projectile here, not the building. Sorry. New arrow. Alright, so we'll get the position in a second. The owner is this, and the target is closest dot hose. Probably should create a new vector. Just in case. Okay, so we did that. We need a new vector for our position. Pose.x, pose.y. It is capitals. Great. So that'll pass in the projectile. Projectile will do its own thing. We already have projectile set up to work for just a straight shooting missile projectile. So this is perfect. We need to... Let me check my prompt. Let's see. We did this. We did this. We did this. Okay, just those 2 left. Alrighty. Let's see. I wanted to add something to the mouse. Let me grab it real fast, and I will go over it with you. Oh, it's the keyboard. It's adding to the keyboard. I'm sorry. And it's to get a single press is what it does. So that when you hold the button down, it doesn't count as being pressed every frame, which is important. Let's see. Keyboard begin input. And then I'm going to go over every line, but I am going to paste it in. Alright, so if you remember get press, right? It's just checking to see if a specific key gets pressed. So it loops through all things that are pressed and checks for key. So now we're going to loop through all things pressed, but we're also going to check if it's in the previous pressed keys. Okay, so remember I told you previous keys were important? So previous keys get set by whatever was their last frame. Okay, so, and we're going to say if the key is in the previous keys, so if the pressed key is in the previous keys, we're going to say is in is true, and we're going to break out. So we don't keep looping, because, you know, you could press 500 keys if you felt like, not really. I mean, what does a keyboard have? 100 keys? I don't know. They could all be technically pressed. So it loops through. You want to break out just so that you save yourself some time. If you don't break it, don't do this, it won't cause a bug. It just doesn't, it's less efficient. Okay, and then if it's not in the previous keys, so if not in then we're gonna, and all the other things that were true before are also true, we're gonna return true. If not, we're gonna turn false. So this is, I use this more than I use anything else, to be honest. Single press is my go-to. I mean, for every hotkey, for the most part, you want single press. You don't want a continuous return of true every frame. You can almost, it's almost impossible to touch a key for one frame when you're pressing a key on your keyboard. So we don't want that. We want a single press so that it doesn't continue going off. And that's this function. So take a good look at it. I'm going to move away from it. Pause if you need to look at it for a little longer. But anyway, that's that. And then we are going to move over to hero. And we are going to say, we're doing keyboard stuff up here. So we might as well stick with that and do our keyboard stuff up here. We're gonna grab that. The number 1 is D1, D2 is 2, D3 is 3, and then numpad 1 is on the numpad. So if you want to do that, you can do that also. I'm not going to worry about it right now. But we're going to use single press, just like I had said. And then we are going to not do this stuff. We're going to do game globals dot pass building, which we just set up. We are going to pass a new arrow tower. The owner ID is the same as what we're working on. OWN owner ID. There we go. Okay, and then we are going to pass it. We'll start with on top of us, which is just pose.x, pose.y. But that's not actually that great. Eventually we want to place it nicely, and we'll probably spend some time showing that. But for right now, I'm just going to place it above us, which is y negative 30. Alright, so that places that on the screen above us, and I mentioned we needed to do just a little bit of cleanup. I made a mistake somewhere in here. Go to definition. Okay, so this code for our shader is not running for buildings, and it's not running for spawn points, I believe. And I made that mistake, and I needed to rectify it, so just copy and paste it into buildings, and then I believe spawn point needs it as well. Yeah, it does. So I was getting some weird stuff on my test program, and it was due to this. That is just sloppy on my part. I apologize for the sloppiness, but that will fix part of the issues that we're having there. Yeah, I think we're ready to run it. Let's see if our arrow towers do what they're supposed to. Oops. Well, we broke the game, so that it didn't work. Owner equals owner. Tackable object up there. Alright, let's see what we got. There we go. We're gonna drop a 1. Oop, I didn't change the image. And they don't seem to be doing anything. So we will double check that. We'll double check both those. Okay. So first off, this is arrow tower. Next, I don't know if it wasn't firing. Override, so that's something. Tower. Override. And then let's double check arrow real fast. So one thing about arrow is it's long and skinny, so let's change that. But we do have the right thing in. All right, let's see if that works out better for us. Alright, place some towers. That's the correct art. Ooh, we see arrows going off. But they are firing weird. They are not firing where I expect them to fire. Why? Huh. Alright. Interesting. Alright, let's, this is backwards. I had it right the first time. If closest dist is greater than current dist. That's my problem. Right there. That's, I had it right the first time, and then I convinced myself I had it backwards. And, you know, that's what they tell you about second guessing yourself. Doesn't usually work so good. Alright, let's try it one more time. That's what we wanted. Alright. So we have these wonderful towers now that can help us. Notice they still leak sometimes. So. And also, when I hold down the button, notice I'm not getting right now. I'm holding down the button and nothing's happening. I'm going to push it a couple times really fast. And that's that. So, yeah. This was our tutorial for today. We achieved all our goals despite the fact that it took me a couple tries. But, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, make sure you push that like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Please consider Patreon. It would be wonderful to start to get rid of some of this programmer art and move on to some real artist art. But yeah, we now have the ability to add towers and protect our guy. If you notice, though, they will run right through the towers, so there is no pathing yet. And there's nothing that stops us from building gajillion towers. So obviously there's going to have to be some kind of resource that stops us from building towers. So gold or something. But yeah, that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.